We are now live, I hope so, yes, on ISPD Innovation in Diplomacy channel. I would like to welcome everyone who is joining us on this session today. I'm very happy to have this session today on one of the aspects of soft diplomacy skills and soft diplomacy. As you know, we have various topics already tackled in the past weeks. During the Corona crisis, ISPD and Innovation in Diplomacy is offering various aspects of the world of soft diplomacy. I am more than happy that we have already tackled various things regarding to soft diplomacy. And today, one topic that is going to be very interesting, hopefully in the terms of how we can deduct soft diplomacy and soft diplomacy skills to branding. And today we are not going to talk about the image branding of persons. We are going to speak about country branding and city branding. And therefore, I'm more than happy to welcome all our visitors today to this live session. And I'm happy to have you with us. First of all, let me introduce our expert to you today. We are very happy to have Mr. Mahmood Wahaibi with us today. He is an urban planning expert and researcher, co-founder of Oman Think Urban, board member of Future City Council of Canada. And we are very happy to have Mr. Mahmood Wahaibi in our experts pool, and we have already enjoyed various sessions together. For example, understanding Arab perception of European culture and our understanding from the Arab perspective. So we are very happy to have this collaboration with Oman Think Urban. Good evening, Mr. Mahmood. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Thomas. I am doing wonderful. I think, you have done a very good job in trying to introduce me, and it is actually a quite humbling for me. So yeah, I am actually pretty excited about today's topic, inshallah.
Yes, we are very happy. Actually, you are joining us from Muscat, from Oman today. This is one of the parts where the ISPD is strongly connected already since many years. We know that the Sultanate of Oman is playing a very interesting and very important role in the region, and the soft diplomatic approach that late His Majesty was playing, and now His Majesty is playing, is for ISPD one of the reasons why we established recently an office here. Today we want to go into that direction a little bit, and why we wanted to ask Mr. Mahmood actually what and why we are having soft diplomacy in our expertise. Mahmood, may I ask you, country branding, city branding, this is something where sometimes people don't really know what it is all about, and how does someone come to this profession to become actually urban planner, for example?
Yes, so I mean, when it comes to branding, in a sense, when we take branding from its very pure definition, branding, it is about perception. How do you perceive a certain thing? It could be a company, it could be a product, it could be a country, it could be a city. So branding, it is in fact, a lot of people, they would associate branding with a product or a company. But in fact, country branding and city branding, it is the oldest one of them all. When you even think about, let's say, the ancient empires, like let's say the Roman Empire. Roman Empire has actually branded Rome as in that, city of education, city of civilization, city of culture. In fact, one of the famous saying about Rome is that all roads lead to Rome, and that is actually a branding slogan in its very own. So it is in fact not a new profession, but then what has happened throughout time is that branding, like especially country branding, has moved from a demonstration of military might, demonstration of economic might, into more of a potentials, cultural experience. How these countries throughout the world, let's say in the past 20 years, could promote themselves and expose their cultural experience, their business potential, and their welcoming environment.
And for example, this is very much related to, of course, to the history and how the country is perceived from the other ones. So like you mentioned, Rome, I think this is one of the examples that could lead today to the image that Rome is having. May I ask you, how was your path from the career perspective to this topic? Because I think many people find this very interesting, but is your profession is something which probably not so many people are aware of what you are doing and how you come to this profession.
Very true. That is actually a very good question. Is that urban planning? I mean, especially when you talk about the East and then even in the West, it is just picking up right now. It is a not very common, let's say, a area of study. But in fact, once again, that it is actually not a new, but it has been more put into an educational discourse recently, rather than a long time ago. Urban planning used to be more organic in a sense, and then it has become more systematic. When you talk about me personally, as Mahmoud, I was actually born to a very urban tribe here in Muscat, Oman. So like we were raised in a city. Most of the discussion that we have grown up hearing as kids, it was all about urban related issues, and our interaction with the urban environment, it was more than just a wall, more than just a road. It was a more of a self representation of who we are. It was a more of a physical manifestation of our own local culture. So that space around us, it does represent who we are. So I could actually really claim that I am an urban planner by heart since a childhood, and it is something that grew up in me. But then it just happened that I have left the country since a young age, where I have pursued urban planning professionally, mostly in the U.S. and at some stage in South Korea. I could, proudly say that I am actually one of the most, let's say, decorated urban planners from the Gulf areas, and actually believed in the message of urban planning and that small connections and these, let's say, interdisciplinary nature of this very field with all the other fields like branding, like marketing, like political science, international relations. You talk about engineering, you talk about infrastructure, because all of these come together to create that. To me, city is a creature, is almost a living creature. So the urban planner job, it is to get all of those living elements, all of those organs together to create that living creature called a city.
Wonderful. One aspect that we would like to know a little bit more. We were talking about urban planning, and how is this related now to city branding? Is this the same approach? Does this go in the same direction? And then is country branding then just do the same thing on a country level, or how could we understand this?
So when again, based off our very initial discussion about what is a country branding, city branding, it has actually evolved into a country a country planning.
Okay.
For example, when you hear a big political decision coming from the US,
Yes.
they would say in the news, Washington has, decided this. Or if you hear about a big news coming from the UK, they would say that London have, done this. So the city itself, it is actually that projection of power that represent behind it the country itself. So there is actually clear link, and you cannot even separate cities from countries. Cities are their economic engine. Cities are their gateways to the world. The country itself kind of crumble itself within that urban arena. In fact, a famous American planner, his name is Lewis Mumford, he has said once that cities are geographical plex. They are almost like a theater, a cultural theater, and people and the citizens are basically the actors in it.
Where is probably as well exactly the connection to the soft diplomacy. We are what we are trying in soft diplomacy, in our expertise, is to create awareness of different cultures, to create understandings of cultures, and to make the people aware of cross-cultural links and communication, and how important it is to understand each other. And in this regard, culture plays a very, very important role, and especially in the city. May I ask you, in terms of cities, or let's say it in city centers, we know all that when we are traveling, what does the typical tourist do? We go to the city center, we go to make pictures for the Instagram profile. We travel more for the experience of taking pictures than actually for traveling, and we are going to the places where other people were already many times, to take again pictures of the same sightseeing spots that were already seen so much. So we don't tackle so much actually the culture anymore. We are perceiving culture in a very superficial way. We just take pictures and so on. May I ask you, from your research, what you were doing, is the tourism sector going into the direction of making more this approach from a visual perspective, or do you think we will go and dive more back to the cultural understanding and to experience the cultures really like they are, and not only through the pictures?
That is, in fact, a very good question. In fact, when you look at one of the most, let's say, like one of the famous country branding indexes, it is the Future Country Index.
Yes.
In fact, most of their studies in the last 2 decades have been signaling more that people are, especially this younger generation, they are drawn more into the cultural experience rather than that man-made artificial experience.
Okay.
When you take an example of, let's say, a city like Copenhagen, it is not a city that is known, for a lot of skyscrapers, not, a city that is, known for a lot of, let's say, crazy, like crazy, urban inventions, like a palm tree island, like the one they have in Dubai. or let's say the tallest building in the world, like Burj Khalifa. But then it still draws a lot of young tourists to it, because there is a certain cultural experience for them that they would experience in this city, in this country in particular, that they won't experience anywhere else.
Mhm.
Copenhagen, and let's say the country itself, they have branded themselves with a certain image that, we are a city that could provide you this experience that no one else could actually provide to you. So if you want to feel that, if you wanted to experience that, it is only here. Another good example, London for the UK. It has been known a place, if especially for students, because
Yes.
it has those great world-renowned educational institutions. What the UK have done behind this is that, behind their promotion and their branding, that London, it is the place to be for you as a student who's looking for a quality education. They have actually thought more is that this student, because he liked the experience of London and the UK, he might be a future investor.
Mhm.
He might be a person who would actually reside in here. He might be actually a brain that could add to the innovation of the country if he decided to stay with that amount of knowledge and education that he or she could possibly transform into a business and even a name for the country.
Mhm. Um, Simon Anhalt, I think, is of course one of these famous personalities that we have to mention probably in all this regard. We had some students who were doing dissertations, and we had people who were doing interviews with him, and I think country branding, country city branding, or branding in this regard, we have to mention him. He's one of the leaders probably in thinking in that specific directions. I recently read something about the Good Country Index. I think this is something which was recently, more or less 5 years or so, more or less, mentioned as well by him. Can you tell us something to understand Simon Anhalt in this regards? What are these good country brand indexes? Is this really, are there very bad countries, not like who are really bad, or what does that mean?
Okay. When you actually look at the very soul of the Good Country Index, it is actually not about being good or bad. It is, when you take the Future Country Index, compare it face to face with the Good Country Index, there is a fundamental a difference between the two. Future Index actually looks at two main dimensions. It it actually looks at the purpose dimension and the experience dimension of that
Yes,
country.
yes.
A purpose dimension, it is, let's say, about your business potential, about your, a value system of them, of that very country, and there are even more KPIs with a line of that purpose.
Yes.
And then in the dimension of experience, it actually looks at the culture, the tourism potential, and then also it does look at, what is being made at that country. It is not necessarily, a tangible production. It could be actually even a cultural production. Look at, for example, South Korea. They have
Yes.
actually managed to have what's so-called that cultural wave through their drama, through their movie, and then through their music, K-pop. That actually alone have created a brand for that country. But then when you look at the Good Country Index, it doesn't actually look at at, at that country itself. It actually looks at the contribution of that country to the rest of the world. So it would look like what type of environmental contribution that country has globally. What type of, let's say, peace contribution that this country have globally. So one, it is about the country itself. The other, it is about that country relation with the world.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. What is quite interesting, probably we have to mention as well that we are not working with Future Brand Index. We are not receiving money from them.
Of course.
But nevertheless, if somebody is interested, you can simply Google it and you can download the entire brand index. And I think it's quite interesting because they, like Mahmood is explaining us so wonderfully, they put brands together. If you go for Germany, you can see that there is the famous German brands, and then as well the culture, the food, what is inside of them. So what the people are associating with this country, and actually, who is at the moment in the Future Brand Index? I'm not 100% aware, but is it Japan or is it Switzerland?
Currently, I'm not sure. I mean, 2020 report has not come yet for the countries, but then they have their report for the companies. As of 2019, Japan actually have topped the list. Then Finland.
Finland, then interesting.
Exactly. You know, one of the things that surprises people is that they would normally expect those big names. You know, U.S., China, UK. You know, a France. Is one of those a superpower countries, because these indexes, whether it is the good country index or even the Future Brand Index, they don't look at countries on a traditional sense. Not about your GDP, not about your economic might, not about how much nuclear arsenal you have, not that. It is actually how much cultural experience you are bringing to the table, how much business potential that you have, how much let's say contribution that you have to protect the environment. What is like the quality of life that you provide compared to the rest of the world? What type of cultural experiences that you have on the table that no one else provides. So I mean, for example, if you just pop the name of Japan to someone, he would definitely think about something like, oh, like the food. I think about sushi. I mean, for example, I think about like some type of a specific noodle for Japan. When they think about quality of life in Japan, they would have certain perception that this country has successfully built upon. This country have successfully branded itself for.
Exactly, and also car. Yes, exactly. I think this was cars as well. And for example, Germany, cars for Germany without cars, of course. In principle, we are already getting into the direction of, well, of course, there are countries that are doing more for that, obviously, and countries who are neglecting it a little bit. So it's not only about now, of course, the ranking, because of course everyone would like to be the best. Now this is typical, but I think what you were saying, Mahmood, is quite interesting. There is we are not doing this ranking just to be the first. We are doing this ranking to have a certain kind of spillover effect and actually the ranking is the spillover effect. The ranking is measuring the spillover effect to various sectors combined with this. How would you see this growing the reputation for a country is for which sectors it is of enormous importance? Just not talking about only the reputation, but about the for example, tourism sector or something to bring money in the country.
Yes, that is also a good follow-up question when we were talking about perceptions. In fact, when you look at these indexes, they are never perfect. They are actually imperfect.
Yes.
But then they do serve as an indication for those different countries that they might not be doing a good job than the other country. So, they may put more efforts on it. One of the things that a lot of branding specialists know about branding a country or a city versus branding a product is that branding a country is less engineered. It is more organic in a sense, because you are already drawing on a legacy that that city or that country has, and you are trying to unearth it, move a little bit of dust from it, and then present it in a way that demonstrate that new brand you're trying to stamp that country or city with. So with that in mind, is that countries has been actually successfully using that brand as a way to lure FDIs, as a
Yes.
way to even increase the amount of tourists into their country. I think the biggest example that we have in this region, in the Gulf region, is Dubai. Although that, I mean, when you compare the historical depth of a country like Oman and Yemen versus Dubai, these two countries have actually more historical depth, have actually a more cultural experience that is so unique to them that nowhere on earth you could see. But then is that those two countries have actually fall short on how they could package that into a brand and that they could sell and demonstrate to the world. While Dubai, they have packaged a name for them. It is that place to be if you want to make business. That is that place to be if you want to experience something extraordinary that you have never seen worldwide. The tallest building, this man-made islands, things that you'll never see anywhere. So they were marketing these elements pretty well, and then using that as a brand to get a massive number of tourists annually, and then to even lure FDI investments from all over the world.
What is quite interesting, we have, I think, in the why country branding, city branding is an interesting topic, especially for soft diplomacy and culture. Is we have to understand it. I think Mahmood, please correct me if I'm wrong. We should not confuse it with propaganda. We should not confuse it with pure marketing for a specific product, because I think we have to build up a reputation which is based on cultural roots, cultural depths, what you were explaining, which is actually we are communicating the truth. Yeah, we are not inventing things. We are taking advantage of the things that are already there. making it, underlining actually the preciousness of this uniqueness and putting it in the spotlight. There are things, of course, where these kind of, we should not confuse it probably with public relations as well, just to do it to attract tourism and so on. So we have to be authentic. There are examples worldwide where this failure of marketing went completely in the wrong direction, where they wanted to build up something, but then at the end of the day, you saw that the day-to-day politics is 100% not corresponding to the image that the country would like to build up. In this regard, Mahmood, are there very good examples of country city brandings? And do you have as well, without mentioning, we are very diplomatic, without mentioning it, but are there bad or not so successful country brandings?
Yes. So I mean, getting into your first element of the question, country branding, it is, once again, based upon a less engineered, a more genuine a strength that these countries have. And then obviously, the more you engineer it, the more you try to change much of it, it will in fact impact the way that you brand yourself. It may even give the wrong impression. So are they good examples? Yes, there are a lot of good examples without mentioning names. But then I think that one of the good examples we have already mentioned. You have London, who
Yes.
have invested more into its name. But then for example, you can see in the future index report is that UK as a country have actually fall short in their index due to a particular a branding shortcomings that they have, and then these are things that for them to work on. Are there also let's say bad examples of city branding? Yes. I mean, I have myself, in my years of experience in the field of planning in several countries, I have actually seen a few cities that have tried to lead a branding campaign.
Yes.
That was actually not as organic or let's say like a more engineered type of a campaign that they're trying to project an image that doesn't really reflect the true identity of that city, and it did actually fail.
I see. In a very practical approach, Mahmood, where would you, as if you were now hired as an expert for enhancing the country branding or the city branding, where would you start? Because we saw it is a very organic, understanding the city as an organic feature. Let me give you an example. I had the pleasure to listen to the mayor of Porto. It's a city, second largest city of Portugal. And they turned the entire city branding into, in a couple of years, from zero, more or less, to a hero. So they started, they did a fantastic campaign. They did not only the design related to the history of the city, so they branded the city completely new. They did a completely image turnaround, and now I think the city is one of the most prosperous city that you have in Portugal. So it is, of course, it is not easy, and each case is different. But for example, where would you start, and how would you start? For example, to enlarge this or to strengthen this city branding in a specific case, for example.
Yes, you have actually mentioned a very good example. In fact, Porto right now has been really branded as this new Silicon Valley for Europe, as it is actually luring a lot of these European companies that were based in London,
Yeah, yeah,
after the Brexit, and kind of took that opportunity, to recreate its name, preparing for this possible upcoming businesses, and then obviously drawing on its historic strength. For me, cities are like humans. Eh, you have to treat them with respect, and then also you have to approach them pretty cautiously, because every human being has a personality of his or her own. Cities are actually the same way. So approach them with respect. Also, approach them with this idea that you know nothing about them. You are just there exploring another human being, and then trying to understand the history and the experience of that other fellow human. Cities are not walls. Cities are not streets. Cities are not, a bunch of concrete put together. Cities are a voice of, uh, of, of this cultural, of this human cultural evolvement through time. It does speak for itself. So, as in a guy, who actually believe in what's so-called participatory approach of planning, and the use of ethnography
mhm,
in planning. And then to just give a small explanation of what is ethnography. Ethnography is about studying that human interaction between people and the city, and city with the people, and then
mhm.
trying to understand how one element impact the other, and then how the other impact that element back. So with that, you would always start with trying to understand the history of the place. Just
Mhm,
it try to roam around it, and then try to understand how the city came to be at the very first place.
mhm,
And then try to actually see what what is the human experience of that place, which you would get from the residents alone, no one else. Try to put yourself in their shoes, and then try to see what type of a use value that they have for each element of the city. An example of me, for example, as a kid growing up here in Muscat Rui, there were this, a parking lot. That parking lot, Muscat municipality have built to be a parking space for a sedan cars. But then that same parking place, it was a desirable place for big truck drivers at night to park in, because it is mostly empty. And then that very same place for us, the kids who grew up in there, at 5 p.m. afternoon, it is our playground for playing football. So the value of that very same space, it is just a piece of parking lot. It differs from segment to segment. For us, the kids in that time, it was a playing ground. For the car drivers, it was an expensive parking place, so they don't park in there. And then for the truck drivers, it was a perfect parking place at night, so they could actually park their truck, sleep overnight, and then in the morning they leave.
Wonderful
So
example. Yes.
so trying to understand that use value of space, it would actually help you get a deeper understanding of how you could brand a city, or even a country.
Wonderful, Mr. Mahmood. I saw that some users are chatting with us a bit, and we have some comments which I think fit perfectly in in the explanation you are giving. 90s here you're saying it's from entertainment perspective or historical, especially the young ages, they tend to modern lifestyle and events too. And then he says as well that we need to maintain the culture elements in a way to establish a decent representation of the city. I think this sums this a little bit together. Of course, we have to understand the specific culture. We have to understand the demography of the specific city, what the needs of the specific people are. The places are different. The places are different, like you explained so wonderfully. And what is the impact of city on the people? We have another question from user Yaya Al-Wahaibi. What is the impact of the city on the people, in your opinion? So probably related to this one, understanding not only the perspective of growing now the brand of the city, but actually understanding the people. How would you link these things one more time together? And as a researcher, what I would be interested as well, if I may ask, how do you do this research? Do you do it in a multidisciplinary approach? Do you go and make qualitative interviews? Do you speak with different generations, or do you observe, or in all this regard?
Sure. Those are very valid questions. There's a basic rule of physics. There's a reaction to every action. So a city, it is not just a made-up product that is let's say static, that doesn't impact people around. Because a city, once it is built upon a certain cultural value, it will eventually impact the life of people who would even move to that city at a later stage, and it would actually force them to follow a certain, let's say, non-verbal culture. It is not necessarily, written in let's say a huge signs saying that don't do this, but then the city itself has a very non-verbal culture that it does communicate to you and make you behave in such a way. An example, if you move to New York City, there are a certain value in the way that you walk on the street that is so inherently different than walking the street of Muscat here in Oman. No one really tell you that don't walk this way, but then you would realize that the urban structure and the people that use this urban structure would eventually, make you follow this movement within that particular city. So and so you don't deviate from the norm that was built in that particular urban setting. You ask about, how we could, let's say, research this. In fact, this is one of the main reasons why I have co-founded Oman Think Urban with Shehla Hussein, and actually the wonderful team that we have here in Oman and even internationally, who are, ranging from, students all the way to professors, entrepreneurs, researchers. And then obviously we are also proud about our strategic relationship as an organization with ISPD. Uh, the way that we have established Oman Think Urban is that planning, it is not a top-down approach that is led by let's say a certain mentality, or let's say a specific motive that is, let's say, economical, or a motive to modernize an area. We actually believe that it is more an interactive approach that allow for bottom up interaction with the establishment to really have a say that people believe that a certain development should be this way because it would serve them better.
I see.
It is almost like a think about you walking down the street. I give this example a lot, but I think it does give the meaning in a very straightforward way. Imagine that you are walking down the street, someone just pops at you with a sandwich, and then just tell you that eat it. You would have that weird reaction that, okay, it's like, who are you? Or I am not hungry, or I don't eat this sandwich. You would be surprised. But then imagine if that same person approach you politely and then say that, sir, are you hungry? I do represent so and so. Are you hungry? You would say that, well, I am a little hungry. uh, I would like something light. Then the guy would go on and saying, okay, so would you like a sandwich? Would you like a salad? You'll be like, well, I like a sandwich. And then he would even go more in asking you, like, are you vegan? Are you a guy who eat meat, or he doesn't like, or you don't like specific meat? So with that, he would go down to exactly the type of sandwich that you would need and you would eat eventually. This is exactly how city services work. Sometimes a city government, they would provide, let's say, a thing like a park, but then you would realize that that park is not used by the people because people has not been asked exactly what you want in that park, and then what type of facilities in that park that would suits you and then suits your need. This approach is ethnographic planning. That is the approach that we are using at Oman Think Urban. So what we are doing right now, actually, we have selected certain locations, certain neighborhood in Muscat, and then we are actually deploying this field work that is that is actually a combination of in-depth personal interviews. So it will not be a question like, it will be actually more of a discussion like, so to understand that person experience of the place, that person perception of that area, and then how is that how he would value his life within that space. Also, we are employing something called silent walkabouts, where we will be walking around that urban area and then just trying to observe silently how that urban system works.
Yes, Mahmoud, this is. Thank you so much for this explanation. I think for the methodology and for the bottom to top approach, and so I think absolutely interesting. One thing which comes in my mind, would you prefer? I mean, you learn a lot about the culture when doing this. You interact a lot with people. You learn a lot. You learned a lot about your culture in Oman. You traveled through the whole Sultanate. You learned a lot about culture. May I ask you, in this respect, of course, thinking on the culture, would it be sometimes easier to start from scratch a city planning, or would it be better actually, or is it more challenging that a city which is already grown to improve the things or to make then the facilities? Because sometimes we have the challenges that, of course, we would like to create the ideal cities. I saw this various times in Latin America, in Brazil, in the cities were built. They were built from scratch. The cities have 5 years. The cities are built in a perspective. I don't know if you know, but I heard one time this, I don't know if it's an urgent legend or so, that the capital of Brazil was only built in 4 years. And the city, Brasilia, and the city and the streets were built in a way that at this time they did not have any traffic lights. They said a city will never grow more than 600,000 people. We don't need traffic lights in the city. So they built the streets in rounds that the people don't have to stop and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, what is your professional approach? Would you like to start from scratch with the ideal city? Is it more challenging to improve the existing cities? Or is there an ideal city where you say this is the place where actually both was naturally grown and is respecting the needs of the people and the culture?
Well, I think that is where the a difference in profession comes to be. You know, I am an urban planner, and then as a typical urban planners, actually, one of my professors, a professor Roger, he used to tell me this: is that urban planners are there to look for trouble, to look for problems. So he said that if there's no problem, then we will not have a job as urban planners. So for me, is that a brownfield development, which is an existing city, to me it is more exciting because I am a very humanist, a guy who look at the city from a very human eye.
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to envision that city from the eyes of its residents, how they perceive it, how they interact with it, how they actually even admire it. A greenfield development, that is actually the dream of architects and developers, because they will get that pure chance, to demonstrate their skills, in trying to, let's say, an architect demonstrate his master building, is like the way that he would design that building, the way that he would design it, and then also for developers, it is an easier space to deal with because they aren't people to interact with, like they aren't let's say a people and even cultural values then that you have to consider. So I am not saying that, let's say, a one type of development it is better than the other. Of course, there are professions who are good at this versus that. For me personally, like I am the brownfield development guy who would look at a cities that are facing problem. And I would like to help.
And in this regard, for example, one of the big problems in these mega cities, and I lived a couple of years in Latin America, and what the image is and what is the branding of the cities, I remember the 2 points which always come even with the image and the branding of these mega cities. Thinking about Buenos Aires or thinking about Sao Paulo or Lima.
Yeah.
Even Rio de Janeiro, and there are parts where what is always, they say, yeah, it's a nice, but for example, security is yes. always an issue. Security is affecting nearly everyone's life, and this is a problem which is, of course, on the image of even a very beautiful city like Rio de Janeiro. The other thing, what I was observing is a very, very a practical approach is the time the people are spending commuting to work, meaning the traffic. In these bigger mega cities, the traffic, the individual, even the public transport is highly, highly overloaded. The people are commuting 2.5 hours in one direction and so on. So therefore, the quality of the city goes, of course, down, and therefore probably the result would be in the city country branding index a lower range. What it is, I know it's very difficult and it's very hypothetical to say, but in a principal way, if we want to enhance the image, we have to tackle these problems. Now, what would you say? We have to solve the security issues. We have to solve the problems with the public, with the individual transportation. Or what would you say in these? Are these the main problems, the environmental problems of cities? What are your thoughts about this?
You have brought up actually a good examples when it comes to Latin America. You know, I have been to Lima, and I did some small project in there. I have been to Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, and then one of the major issues actually, and this is actually the fundamental problem in all these cities, it is the lack of community participation within the planning process.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at, let's say, a place like Rio de Janeiro or even Sao Paulo, you would see a huge, nice luxury building. And then under the shadow of that very building, you would see a poor favelas in there who has been completely left out. With time, you would see also a developer taking also a piece of that favelas and then also turning it into another, luxury living. Although that they are physically next to each other.
Yes.
But then the quality of life between these two areas who are just, back to back is day and night. The problem is that it is within the segregation. The way that they have approached development for them, it is a business opportunity for those developers or for a particular economic gain. But then that have left out an entire population away from that process, and even have managed to stop any type of economic spillover. Huge wall, you cannot even get in there. That physical separation created a segregated urban area that have people who are a bit angry, people who feel that they are being left out, a people who have to struggle, to gain any type of economic benefits to survive. And another area who is luxurious, who is on all of that, but then they have to protect themselves away from that other class of people that they have created in the process. So it is actually not coincidence. It is never a coincidence. It is a man-made problems that comes from the national policies on how to grow economically, and that economic growth came at the expense of the residents of these cities. So by first of all tackling that issue, you would actually solve and then even propose solutions to most of these urban problems that you have, whether it's transportation, whether it is security, whether it is all of that.
Fantastic. I think the issue is hopefully giving a lot of new projects to Oman Think Urban, which you founded together with Sheila Hussein. Can you tell us, finally, I think we are coming slowly to an end of our session.
Yes.
Can you, unfortunately, because I'm very into this topic, I think it's super fascinating. Thank you so much.
Me too.
For spending all my questions. May I ask you, Mahmood, what are your next projects? Are you focusing a lot on Muscat, Oman? Where are you going to be focusing your team?
Well, I think that our current field team and analysis team, they are focusing currently on a finishing our first pilot study, which is the old Ghala area, or the old Ghala village here in Muscat, because ethnography in urban planning has never been used, let's say, tangibly in the Gulf area before, and then especially Oman. So for us is that our focus is right now is to produce our first pilot study as in demonstration is that what we could do and then what we could add to the planning process in Oman, to the development process in Oman, and then even to the decision maker. And then from there, our vision is that to turn Oman Think Urban into a house of excellence for human-centered design and planning. Our goal, to become that hub to be in the field of ethnographic planning in Oman, regionally, and then even internationally. We have been actually getting a good amount of notice from international organizations so far for the work that we're trying to do. And then with that, our hope is that it is to make Oman Think Urban a trusted brand that could sustain itself as an NGO and then even as a business that could support the development of the country. And then that obviously comes, from the trust that we hope that we could gain from our possible potential clients in the country and then even outside of the country. So we are really hopeful that this our first pilot study and the outcome of it could actually prove that we could add value to the planning process. We could add value to your development project. We could add value to your decision today and in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mahmood. We wish you really all the best for the upcoming projects. I think they are going to be very interesting, and we are going to observe very close your next steps and what is going to happen. I'm very happy that we have had this insightful conversation today. I'm very happy personally, and I see that we have a lot of comments to see what happened. Actually, yes, we were talking about Porto City already. Thank you very well, Sarah Namani. I would advise everyone to take a look at Porto City branding. Absolutely stunning. Yes, exactly. We were talking about Porto already today. A lot. Thank you for making this point. Unfortunately, like we said, we have to come to an end today of our session. City nation branding. It was a fascinating session. And a conversation which we had today. Next ISPD knowledge session, 17th of September. We are going to speak about corporate protocol, a little bit more practical protocol work then, but as well part of the soft diplomacy. I would like to invite everybody to join us as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our expert.
My pleasure.
We are looking forward to our next session, and we are looking forward to hopefully new, very interesting challenges and interesting, challenging projects that we are going to have together with ISPD and Oman Think Urban. Mahmood,
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, for even having the time to host me tonight. It was a pleasure actually to talking about these stuff and these things actually do get me excited. So thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. I wish you a very good evening, everybody, a good rest of the day wherever you are, and hope to see you again in the next ISPD knowledge session during the COVID crisis. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.